It's totally okay. Oh, Gabby, you're
I can still, actually, I can still share now. I just made you host on one of yours. I can't tell. You want to be host on both of them?
I'm going to be share from the other, but it'll just be that I could put my video on. That's all. If you guys want me to.
Darlene, you're the only person who has to share outside of the video of our panel, right?
I'm gonna actually, I have just a really quick, I made a really tiny video.
Oh, that's great. I just wanted to make sure
Start.
I didn't have to have something prepared that I dropped the ball on. So
No.
Okay.
No, and then I feel bad because Nancy was on and Patricia, and I don't see them back in yet.
Somebody text Nancy. Patricia, yeah. Let me see if
Oh wait, somebody's in the attendees. Patricia's in the attendees.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I am no longer the host, Darlene, you are, so I can't, oh, maybe it's not till I start. This is so confusing. Do I have a tech person here?
No.
Bailey, are you my tech person?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Bailey, can you help me out, please? So I have,
I just made Patricia a panelist. I just was able to do that from my end. So hi, Patricia.
Hi, I'm trying to get myself revealed.
I think, Yvonne, it looks like we're all here except Nancy.
is Britt here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so Nancy was in the other room as an attendee before we got locked out again. So hopefully.
Patricia and Britt, are you guys able to show your video?
No, the host, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It says the host disabled my video.
I wonder if I can change that on you.
Yeah, I can't reveal.
If you make them panelists, they should be able to have access to their video.
It said the host has stopped my video.
Bailey, are you able to help us here? Because I think
they should be able to.
It should be.
Yeah, because like I can see that their video is turned off, so they should have access to it.
How can we get it to go? Because there's
The
no
error message says
video on.
unable to start video. You can't because the host has stopped it.
Yeah, that's what it says.
I could leave and come back in if that makes any difference, but
I don't think it will.
okay.
Bailey, do you have any suggestions? Can you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna Google it real quick because I've never seen that happen before.
Well, the good thing is everybody's here anyway. There's no, at the moment, no attendees. We're in good shape.
Maybe if you go into participants and click on more next to their name, you can say ask to start video. Maybe that'll work.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do.
I've been trying that too.
Ah, here I am.
Great.
So I went to the 3 dots up in the corner and it worked this time.
And Britt, I think I got yours for you.
Thank you. I clicked it and this time it worked.
Okay, great. All right, so we're just missing Nancy and I know she's here, so, oh wait, let's see, attendees. I don't know who that is. Okay.
So I'm dealing with a massive headache and I have been on too many Zooms, 5 hours on Earth Day. I have to keep a distance. That's why I have my glasses on. These are the computer glasses. So I'm kind of sitting back because every time I get close to the screen, I get a headache.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
You have
Brain
beautiful,
cancer or
beautiful
something.
glasses, by the way.
Oh, did we start the webinar? Did somebody?
It's recording, so you must have.
Okay.
And we have 2 attendees in.
Okay. I'm not Nancy yet.
Patricia, it's like our bodies are we're not supposed to be doing this, right?
No, it's too
Every
much.
day on Zoom and yeah.
I have actually took a cord home from school for my projector that I found that I could plug into my TV. So I've actually been, until right now, enjoying the symposium on my TV, which is much better than the close screening.
Nice.
And you can see the art better that way too. Okay. Bailey, can you tell if we started the webinar? Like, can the attendees see us and everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started then? I guess I'll just text Nancy to just say, please log back in.
Patricia, did my secretary touch base with you and is everything
I
good?
think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know if you need anything.
10 is a little more complicated.
Is it? Oh, I
Yeah,
would think we're complicated.
there's 4 steps involved there. Yours was easy. Yeah,
Oh, thank God.
yeah, I still haven't figured it all out.
It just gets worse. It make it more complicated. If you all know, and I know Gabby.
You know, I'm like, I need assistance, fill out this form.
Yeah.
It's like the federal government.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everybody. I'm Yvonne Love. I'm an associate professor of art here at Penn State. And I'm the coordinator for the Studio for Sustainability and Social Action at the Abington campus. I'm really happy to present, sorry, just one of our panelists. Can somebody reply, one of my people, to Nancy to tell her in an email that she just sent? Sorry about that. I'm happy to present this collaboration between artist, poet, writer, and anthropologist centered around the climate crisis. One of the things in our presentation that we have for you that we didn't share was what it was like in our collaboration that we were sharing these folios to receive a folio. And I made a very, very short video of that process of receiving the folios in the mail. And after I show this very quick video, I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, Patricia Watts. So I'm going to share my screen. And I'll just ask Darlene real quick if you wouldn't mind letting Nancy, she's in the attendees, become a host.
All righty. Hang on tight, Nancy. Here you come.
Okay, so here on my screen, which is shared with you guys now, is the folio. So I'm just going to share this real quick video. So that's sort of just a little precursor before we start our presentation. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Patricia Watts. She's the founder of ecoartspace, which recently became a membership platform for artists addressing environmental issues. From 1999 to 2019, ecoartspace operated as a bi-coastal nonprofit in partnership with Amy Lipton. Watts has curated over 30 art and ecology exhibitions, including Performative Ecologies 2020, Contemplating Other 2018, Enchantment 2016, Fibershed 2015, Shifting Baselines 2013, Make Craft 2010, and Hybrid Fields in 2006. She has interviewed 30 pioneering ecological artists for the ecoartspace archive and has written action guides of replicable social practice projects, including Eve Mosher's High Water Line and Tatfu, Tan's SOS. Watts has a visionary entrepreneurial approach to curating that supports transdisciplinary and transformative collaborative environments. We are very lucky to have her moderate our panel today as she brings deep insight into the driving concern of this collaboration. It is my pleasure to welcome Patricia Watts. And Darlene.
We're having some sound problems. 1 second. Hang on there, Patricia. Can you guys hear that?
No.
Oh dear.
You have to share your computer audio when you share.
Right. Hang on.
And is interesting because of a lot of projects this past year. It hasn't really been a change in focus from climate to COVID-19. It hasn't been a big leap. And in fact, it's been a magnifier for the entanglements that connect humans and non-humans in these different worlds that collide. First, I'd like to introduce Yvonne Love, and she's known for her love for bringing people together. She's an avid collaborator, as I understand. She's an American sculptor and installation artist. Her work observes and records and responds to the beauty of nature and the anthropogenic issues related to the climate crisis. In exploring these issues, her work is often in collaboration with biologists, environmentalists, poets, musicians, as well as other visual artists. Yvonne, I'm hoping maybe you could talk a little bit about the vision of the collaboration, how it came about, maybe explain the process by which the folio pages were being mailed to each other and how, this, call and response process works.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I have known most of the women involved in the collaboration for considerable number of years and some less. And I just was at a time where I felt like I wanted to have people with like concerns come together and have a conversation. I often like to take a walk. I had hoped that we might start our conversation by actually taking a walk together. And it didn't happen in the beginning. And although we planned it for later on, the pandemic kind of took that piece away. But the people that I included were friends, they were mentors, and sometimes collaborators themselves. And the only person that wasn't that was Nancy. And Nancy Campbell, I just started reading The Library of Ice, and I was really taken with the way she wrote and what she was writing about. And so I had invited her into the collaboration as well. And thankfully she agreed. So I think, there's something to be said for surrounding yourself, with different voices, but there's also something to be said for surrounding yourself with like voices in a way to bring some positive energy around a subject that's so critical at this point in time. So that was where the collaboration started. And Gabby and I have been collaborating for, I don't know, a dozen years or so now. So she actually helped me put together the idea for the folios, and we actually put the folios together and sent them out to everyone to get the process started. And basically each folio had 6 pages. And so each artist writer would take a page and make a contribution. And some people chose to respond to the previous pieces in the folios as they were passed along. And some people, used it as it's just a journal entry. So it may have just been something of the day. So it was a way of collecting ideas. It was sort of a collection of conversations. And I think we each felt like it was a gift every time we received one of these folios in the mail. In addition to that, we were also having monthly conversations. So we had sort of a dual kind of thing happening there.
I can see how, there's a system behind it, and the call and the response can provoke and evoke, work that you would have never created on your own. And that's kind of the beauty of a collaboration like this. So Yvonne, let's take a look. I'm gonna go into the gallery. I'm gonna share my screen. So knots. And what I was interested in this piece because you talked about, or I read that you used Audubon book pages and you cut them up and rearranged them and use these black threads to tie the paper together and knot them. And that kind of ties back to another metaphor, hard to get away from metaphors on this one, the entanglements of the human and the non-human aspects of what's happening with the pandemic and prior with climate change, both.
Yeah, so ironically, this is the very first piece that I made. This was the first folio that I had started. And my subsequent pieces were always responding to what had come before in the folios. And my final piece responds to quite a few different things. But yeah, my father and stepmother are naturalists, and so I grew up bird watching. So it's definitely a part of my fabric. And I don't necessarily separate the way that I think about things in general is all interconnected. And so at the time that I was making this, I was also doing interviews with my dad and my stepmom about their life lists. So my father has over 50 years of life lists, these big stacks of papers with little check marks of birds and then notes about what the weather was like and where they were and who they were with. And so, you know, I'm thinking about process and thinking about notation. And I also, on my mom's side of the family, come from a long line of seamstresses. And so thread and sewing is also part of my fabric. So everything sort of comes together. And so these are little pieces that are sewn. And so are they noting points in time? Are they noting conversations? Are they holding things together, holding things down? Knots tend to be the back side of things, but so is this the front or the back? So there's some tension and juxtapositioning ideas and resources. And then all the pieces are wings. And so I think a lot about flight and movement. And then the other side is all very calm because, well, it's not calm because there's so many pieces of thread on the surface, but they're all the white pages they're blank. And so it's sort of this juxtaposition between dark and light and flight and being static.
How many, is this the only one like this that you made, or was this a series?
This was the only one specifically like this, but I used thread in a lot of the pieces, and the thread is used in all different ways. So sometimes it's knotted, sometimes it's sewn. I was playing with thread that doesn't appear anywhere in the studio, letting it roll off of a spool and making videos. Yeah, so I'm using it in a lot of different ways. And there are other pieces that have pages of the same book, but not all of them.
Right. Really, really nice piece.
Thank you.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. So next, I'm going to switch to Deanna Day, who is a writer, and she's responsible for designing the catalog for the exhibition, which is online. And let's see here. She's a writer and a historian whose work centers on questions of embodiment, identity, and the tools we use to manipulate both. She writes fiction and nonfiction. She gives lectures and runs workshops, conducts interviews and oral histories, and curates exhibitions. And she writes short stories. And I think from what I've read from this project, it's speculative futures is what I'm picking up on. And so we're going to look at the work. Let me see. This is a series of questions that she's come up with. She's titled Space, and it's based on the work of Nancy Campbell, titled Black Hole, which we're going to see in the gallery here. And I'll have her read and find the work, which is right over here. And so Deanna, do you want to read your space questions?
Yeah, so I'll just say that I was really inspired by this piece of Nancy and the prose that she's written around it, but also this pencil sketch of this black hole. And it got me thinking about space and how terrifying I find it and why, and thinking a lot about like the emptiness of space and the void of space. And I was just trying to ruminate on that, and this short story, which is a conversation, came out of that thinking. So Britt Dahlberg is going to join me in reading this piece. She's going to take one role and I'll take the other in this conversation. So Britt, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Lovely.
If the sky were infinite, would it be so full of stars that from our perspective, there would be no space between them?
I'm not sure. Would the planets get in the way? Other things? Hold this up to the line for me.
Wouldn't it be pretty though, if the sky were all stars?
Maybe, for a bit. It might be overwhelming if the sky were so bright all of the time.
Maybe. Do you think the sky is infinite?
I'm not sure I could tell you. It looks finite to me, but so does everything. I can only see so far. Come along, next up.
But if the sky is finite, then this other book says that means it's growing. Where's it growing into?
More sky? I don't know. What's anything growing into?
Well, like how when you're a person, you're growing into a new person all the time?
You're certainly bigger now than you used to be.
Don't splash. I mean, our cells and stuff are always turning over, aren't they? Like when we make new skin under scabs, new blood, our bits are always dying and growing back.
So we're living in new bodies all the time?
Yeah. Is the sky a new sky all the time?
By that logic.
If the sky is finite.
Are we new people all the time?
Yeah.
Why?
Because we are our bits.
Are we anything else? Where did you put those?
Here. You mean like how we have all these bacteria in our guts?
Sure. We're made up of a lot of things we can't see. All the things in the spaces between.
Between what?
Between all the things.
But there's always more space between things? Like under a microscope, are there always more things? Where do they go?
Different parts of us grow in different directions.
In different dimensions.
Now who's splashing? How do we grow in different dimensions? Like the bubbles?
I guess.
What did you mean? Which dimensions?
Like we grow up in time?
I like that. What else?
What about like us? The us that isn't our bodies, can that grow?
Yes.
Where? Into what space?
The space between us.
For how far?
Thanks, Britt.
Thanks.
The second piece by Deanna, a story she wrote based on a work by Darlene. It's titled Ducts, and it's also like as in milk ducts in the breast. And wait, it's titled Milk Ducts and Tumor by Darlene, is a 3D printed breast. So I'm gonna back out here and go over to that piece. Okay, I'll let you take it again, Deanna.
Yeah, so this piece was inspired by Darlene's 3D printed breast. And it's my inspiration was extremely literal, as you'll see when I start reading. While I was growing her, I couldn't help but dream up possible lives she might live. They sprouted, unbidden, incessant and iterative, linking together in an impossible web of futures. Like a daisy chain, I say, remembering. Like weeds, she says, laughing, when there were weeds. She trawls her eyes through the charred underbrush and gently places another mushroom in the sack. She spots the changes in texture and light that I usually miss. I tell myself it's because she's so much smaller, closer to the ground, but it feels like we have different kinds of eyes. I let her peer into piles of leaves, and I watch her hair as the wind blows it over one shoulder. While I was growing her, I knew what my body was for. And before it was growing her, my body was growing me. I haven't figured out yet what I'm growing now. I watch her digging gently through the earth, and my body feels like all the gas pumps, plinths into cracked concrete, tubes ossified where they reach for empty tanks. I crouch down and drag my finger through a patch of old ash, drawing a crude, childish flower, a circle, 5 loops, around it a stem. Love me not, I say, and she looks back at me. We used to pull the petals off to predict the future. I thought she would be shocked or angry by the violence or the waste, but instead she tilts her head. But you knew the future, she says carefully. And I think of my mother, the time I broke my arm in 3 places, the way she stared at the x-ray like something wasn't adding up. In front of me, my daughter's eyes squint. We live on opposite sides of the end of the world. She turns back and drops another mushroom into the sack. Yeah, and what I was trying to do with this piece was imagine what it'll be like for the generations that come after us, and thinking of how we are and aren't caring for them in the ways that we care for the planet, and what we're leaving them and what they're going to think about that, and about us as they grow up.
So yeah, and I, just keep going back in my head about how the pre-pandemic urgency of climate change and the pandemic just melded together to create a moment, where it's just, sinking in big time. And this work definitely provokes that. I mean, there are so many people who, can't even quote a statistic right now, but, cancer, we all know someone who's had it, been treated for it, and has passed from it. Okay. So Britt is an anthropologist and a public humanities scholar. Her ethnographic work has explored life amidst environmental risk and uncertainty. Across projects, she is interested in the practice and relationships involved in research and the exploration of different forms of attending to, knowing, and relating to worlds around us. In addition to published writing and formal talks, she has used anthropological research as the basis of creating oral history collections, public programs and dialogues, in-person and online exhibits, and theater performance. Her work consists of photographs, oral histories, personal journals, and field notes. And what we're looking here at on the screen is her work titled Childhood. And it's got a mix of tadpoles and other stuff, a conversation with Ruth, a fun place to be with a kid, and a reference to Sarah, which I'll let Britt describe for us now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think this whole collaboration has been a real delight, and throughout it, and while we were working on the folios, I was working with this question where I remember Yvonne talking about how we'd sort of alternating writers and artists, and so I sort of worked with this question the whole time of what is the stuff I work with as an anthropologist in a collaboration like this? What is my genre? What do I work with? What am I making? And so those questions and tensions were really productive to me and were something that worked with me throughout the collaboration. This was one of the earlier folio pages. We struggled a bit with how to display later because I took quite delight in having flat pages, but they were very visceral and things that, as I shipped off to Darlene next in our chain, I anticipated her opening, and kind of they had many possibilities for how she could handle it and work through. This one, the form it's got the folio page, but then I took a small like dollar store photo album, cut it open, and then had multiple pages there that flip through. And I was playing here with how this question of living with worlds as they end, was thinking a lot about relationality of between people, between places and materials and other things. And the photos are my own from when I was a kid. And I think later on too, the sense of wanting to touch again the outer world once we were in the pandemic came to mind. But here, having some of those photos, and then also working with how do we come to know self in relation to others. So here I was working with actual interview transcripts, different projects I'd been a part of. The ones with Ruth were with a collaborator when I was doing research at an asbestos waste site outside of Philadelphia, thinking of lived histories of industrialization and occupational environmental health. And this complexity for folks who, this was also maybe now narrated by some as just a toxic place, but how do we take seriously that materiality and meaning of a place that was also childhood and family and community, and a place of really beloved memories at the same time, and that complexity. And that's some of what I was starting to work with here.
Great. Well, yeah, let's take a look at a second piece that's not in the gallery, titled Where and With Whom We Do Attend, that addresses geology, race, and matter, which we'll find.
So this was the very first folio page that I created and sent. And so I was acutely thinking here about what I write here of sort of whose voices, when we're thinking about this prompt, it started also around climate change. I was thinking of ethnographic work I'd done and the ways that it makes a big difference who defines the problem and where it's located and what its scope is. And I was thinking actively about race and about climate change and who was missing in our collaboration in our account. And I wanted to bring in bits of other voices and perspectives that felt essential to me. And this was one that was very much a whole host. So thinking also as an anthropologist that a lot that I work with is other people's writings and theories and reflections and research. And so this one had an envelope on the back and all these snippets that also have my marked up notes and the ways I was making sense of these writings and trying to weave them together. When Deanna was just talking from one of her written pieces about this sense of feeling like we and this future generation will have in her piece different kinds of eyes, I was thinking of how do I get aware of my own eyes and lens here, and how do I start to notice what I'm missing and bring that in. It was a bit of collections, literally even a piece of grass I found growing up out of the sidewalk around me in the city where I live, prompts of questions, and very much my process of other writers. And with this question on the envelope, as I said, that was tucked to the back of the page, says what to tuck away and what to keep in view, which threads to pull. It was very much a provocation to myself and to our collaboration, and imagining sending on to Darlene to just see, what do you make of this stuff that is grabbing my attention to? What of it starts to inform the work? What are we tucking away and back in this envelope, and kind of what are we leaving out on the table?
Very nice. Yeah, I like the way that you are making which a lot of artists do, the research process and making it visible and making it tactile as well.
Thanks. I was thinking as Yvonne was talking of what's usually on the back of the page, hearing you talk about process and the threads, I'm struck yet again how much our own versions of these some questions ran through us. And I kept kind of grappling with what we present up as an exhibit piece or as the final piece, how we think of that expertise, and also very much wanting to bring process to bear, partly for this question of what are we then cutting out of these final, more polished narratives? And I feel a real pull to getting that process out on the table.
Yeah, and that's what we've been doing the last year, is really digging. And a lot of us feel like we've gone back to graduate school or getting a PhD on Zoom. Okay, well, thank you, Britt. I'm going to move on to Nancy Campbell, who's a Scottish poet and nonfiction writer. Her work has engaged with the polar environment since winter, spent as an artist in residence at the most northern museum in the world in Greenland in 2010. Her books include The Library of Ice, Readings in a Cold Climate, Disco Bay, and How to Say I Love You in Greenlandic. She was appointed Canal Laureate by the Poetry Society in 2018 and received the Ness Award from the Royal Geographical Society in 2020. I understand that Nancy was a guiding voice throughout the collaboration, and she created an alchemical mix of sketches and prose. A passage in one of her writings that caught my attention was, "We draw together as worlds pull us apart." So she has sound files in the on the website, or sound files of her writings, and we're going to listen to a couple of them now. And this is the text for Lockdown. I don't have an image that goes with this, but I think we'll just listen to an excerpt from this for a minute to get a sense of, I think I might need to refresh my page actually. Get a sense of where we were at in our heads when this all started exactly a year ago, almost today.
Lockdown, 51 degrees north, 1.2 degrees west. In those first days when death was still unusual, we became obsessed with rolls of toilet paper sold in multiples of 12 and 24. We did not go to supermarkets, but everyone could see the news, the shelves empty, where a few people had bought up everything in store. Surely there were other things that should have concerned us more. Cherry trees blossomed and the avenues grew greener. Children painted rainbows in windows facing the street. It did not rain. On Thursday evenings, we heard the sound of applause drift over the suburbs. Sometimes the beating of a saucepan, a car horn, a scattered clapping in praise of an unseen, underpaid performance. Strangers began to edge away from one another. We acted like people on the verge of becoming lovers, afraid a touch might give away desire. We began to walk in zigzags, switching from pavement to opposite pavement. The act of crossing the road to avoid someone was a courtesy now, rather than an affront.
So that's just an excerpt that the text is right here above it on the website under exhibitions. And I did check out the longitude and latitude, and she was coming from Oxford, UK at the time. So we have a second one that another audio file by Nancy titled Ice Age. And this actually overlays with work by Darlene Ferris-Labar, who is coming up next, but goes together with her work titled Blood Beneath the Ice, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But so I'm gonna start her audio.
Ice Age. This encounter at a cold border is a vanishing point. Molecules begin to slow, their bonds fuse and fix as ice forms from water and melts back to water. Oceans open to the sky. All water knows the fury of tides, even when molecules slow, when bonds momentarily fix. Ice grows from an impurity, a brine-ridden hint of dignity creeping over the oceans. All water knows the fury of the tides can bear the weight of any ice. The glacier advances to the coast. Ice grows from an impurity, tiny, crystalline, and sevenfold. The ocean's leaden currents slip beneath old flows to mine the secrecy of ice. Bergs split from the glacier, dancing with new partners and turning like the planets, while warm ocean currents slip over dark crevasses, seams of coal deep down where once sequoias grew. The continental plates migrate, echoing the planets, concealing fossil fuels that might conduct electric light, lying rock-bound, inaccessible, where once sequoias grew, before this encounter at a cold border, a vanishing point. Conductor of stars and silence, refusing to fuel our noise, ice forms from water and will melt back to water.
That worked out well, the overlay there. So next is Darlene Ferris-Labar, and Darlene is known for her 3D printing and other emerging technologies to focus her art on various plant species. Her art requires research through environmental interaction and the study of a variety of ecosystems. She focuses on magnifying and minimizing nature through digitally designing and 3D printing. Her work made during Living with Worlds found comparisons to both the human body and the planet and how they mirror each other. So maybe, yeah, I'll just have Darlene respond to that collaboration or the response of Ice Age to your work.
So yeah, I was really inspired by Nancy's book, Library of Ice, and of course this work that she wrote called Ice Age. So I started to look into how glaciers are maybe formed or how they vanish, and I came upon this glacier in Iceland that had, was the first one that totally vanished. It disappeared. It died. And at the same time, I had this horrible bruise on my leg that I was watching as I was doing research on this topic about the glacier. And I found that as glaciers were melting, there's a similar pattern, that we would see as our body heals the bruise. And so I took multiple pictures through the duration of the time I had this bruise on my leg to when it finally vanished. And so I morphed them together in this video. And it started to be also very reminiscent of ice. And so the piece, I titled it Blood Beneath the Ice.
And so, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear you. Nancy's prose was in response to your piece?
My piece was in response to Nancy's.
To Nancy's piece, the other way around, yeah.
Yes.
Very nice work. We're going to show one more piece by Darlene, that a video work, and she's going to read a poem which she wrote. And the video is titled Vessels Within, and the poem is titled The Great Pause.
The great pause, a moment some have waited for. We breathe. As breath becomes night, those dark places are revealed. We continue to breathe. Tree branches reach far to the sky, networked, intertwined, reaching. They are breathing. We hope for more, but we grasp for a chance to survive. We savor to just breathe. New dimensions and realities are felt. We gasp for air and the chest becomes heavy. A breath is worth more than anything. As darkness closes during this great pause, we begin to see everything clearer. A slow breath, then another, and another. Nerves reach out like branches. There is a pause between inspiration and expiration. A final breath disappears. Let's see here. That
goes on for another minute or two, but do you want to talk a little bit more about this piece?
Sure. My work typically is always about finding beauty, kind of making people aware of wonderful things on the planet, like plant species, for example. But I felt like this piece was a way to show the deeper feelings and the fears and all that was happening during this time. So, you know, maybe this video can kind of unveil all that was going on, and you know, in our inner selves, and people in the future or looking back can kind of understand a little bit what we're all dealing with. I kept hearing on the news about people that were in hospitals and they couldn't breathe because of COVID. And I was thinking how horrible it would be to be stuck in this hospital by yourself, and what would be going through your mind, what was happening during that time. And so I replicated the beeping sounds that you might hear in the hospital, you know, and maybe some deeper sounds within as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing more about it. We have one more artist, and we're kind of coming up against, well, I think we've kind of passed our time limit, but I'm going to keep going here. Gabby, or Gabrielle Rusamongo, I think I'm pronouncing your name right. She's an American photographer and installation artist who has explored a range of subjects, from the signposts and artifacts of American culture to the emotional landscape of coming of age. Her folio work was climate related, and during the pandemic became a documentation of her walks in a nearby graveyard. So I just want to show you real quick. This is the graveyard work. Let's go to the folios. You can see the folio work first. Here we are, which is very climate. Out of all of the artists, it seems like your work is distinctly, you know, you've got the iceberg. This image, I can kind of go through the images here. There's a bird in a nest. And I want to hear about all of these, but I want to also have you share. Here we go. So I'm going to give you the floor. Get here.
Thank you,
Gabrielle, and then let me open it up here.
So let's see.
Yeah, maybe just talk about that transition, because I mean, they really are entangled, but you took a departure. You went straight into the cemetery, and that became your focus after lockdown.
Right. You know, when I started working on what I thought was going to be the exhibition pieces, or that I was going to make in our residency, I wasn't really focused on graves. I was focused on ghosts, actual ghosts, voices of ghosts, and I was visualizing these kind of ghosted realities by compositing images that came from some of my own photographs, but also archival images. And so in my folios, they look like sort of straightforward photographs, but they're often what you're looking at. The iceberg is, for example, the first iceberg, that's a composite of about 7 or 8 different images from different places made into a reality that looks like something we might find. And then as you just click, if you click through some of the others, these were images also where I was taking the degradation of the photographic material off of one archived file, and then I was compositing other figures into it to create these new realities that were a modern response using historical vintage photographs. I really like working in 2 realms, photography being an extremely of the moment, immediate, very modern sort of technology. But I really, when you can't always make the images yourself, I really enjoy looking for source material elsewhere and constructing something in the conceit of a modern photograph. So for me, I'm weaving the past and the current moment all of the time. And there's something really beautiful about image degradation that I like. And this is a photograph of a marble hand from a very large statue that I made in silver, that I solarized digitally, and that I composited with ice elements, right? So every one of these pieces had these layered processes, not unlike what Darlene went through in the constructing of her work. So the pieces I was originally going to make were related to this process of looking at archival imaging, archival images, scanning them and combining them in a composited fashion with photographs that I was making in a contemporary space. And while all that was happening, and while I was building out all of that work, every day I was walking in a graveyard that's about 100 yards from my house. And I raised my daughter in this neighborhood. She learned how to fly kites in this graveyard. She learned how to ride bikes in this graveyard. So it is not a sad place for us. It's very much like our local park. And almost never in the 25 years I've lived across from this graveyard ever saw a live grave or a very soon after burial plot begin to change over time, have grass reseeded, etc. And it was just that so many people were dying. Every day there were 1 or 2 new graves. So this is 25 graves in 25 days, but in point of fact, there were close to 40 or 50 graves in this short period of time. And I just felt, the portrait photographer in me felt as though I had to catalog this information. And it was just so pressing while I was thinking about everything else. This just kept insisting on my imagination. And I felt like I needed to make this installation. Were you looking at it in real life, it would be 10 feet by 10 feet. These would be 2 by 2 foot square images. And I treated each of these graves the way I would have treated a portrait. I saw each of them as a representation of a person, of a moment in time laying waste on the grave itself, time rebirthing the ground around the grave. And so it just became a type of microhistory of a month. And I decided to include it in this. It's a very literal accounting of a world ending, and not nearly as sort of metaphoric as the works of my collaborators and also works that I had made prior. But I just felt a sort of political and social need to put this work in the world at a time when our own government and failures of the state were making the problem worse. And I just wanted to name, like, there are no names here, but the picture for me is naming the act, pointing to the act of someone passing in these huge numbers in short periods of time.
Great, thank you for the helping me understand that relationship between the two. And I kind of thought it was a diversion, but I can see that kind of ghostly quality in the folio work, and that you would be attracted to the cemeteries as well. And it's related. I mean, we're all kind of contemplating our own demise here through the pandemic, but also through climate change. So very interrelated work. So that is all the 5 artists who are present out of the 6, and we've just discussed all 6 artists' work. I do want to give Yvonne a chance here to talk about in the gallery, her, where is it in the gallery? Let's see here. Okay, here we are. Yeah, and I'd like you to talk about the, the red thread and how that became a symbol and a way to interweave the works that were done between all of you. Most of you, at least 2, I guess, did not participate in the red thread, but
Well, I think also Nancy, every one of her folio pieces has Black writing, and then she uses red to articulate certain things. And then clearly in Gabby's photograph, in the second one, that is the red thread that becomes sort of a life preserver. And Britt was using it as well. And so I just bought tons of spools of red thread and started playing with it. And if you scroll down a little bit to show the actual piece, there's words on there. It says, I will stay, entangled, wait, draw, and mask. And those are little tiny nails. And then I've tied the red thread to each one of those nails that acts as a drape over a whole lot of chickadees that are in different, some of them are dead and some of them are flying, and they're doing all different sorts of things. So it's sort of this layering. And the piece came about actually during our residency that was supposed to take place in Brighton, but ended up being on Zoom. But we met every day for the week and started things, talked about ideas. And so, you know, the chickadees, again, I just used them as a metaphor. It was one of my stepmom's favorite birds. And I just used that as this for the repetitive pattern of the birds and the things. My backyard birds are sort of the measure. And also my dad was saying, hey, have you seen any chickadees? I haven't had any in the feeder. So, you know, that's our register of climate change and how things, so whether they're not coming in because they've moved their location at certain times, they're, you know, traveling north, you know, earlier in the spring or later in the fall. It's our barometer for what's happening in the environment. And then at the same time, I actually was making a whole series of porcelain masks with things like wait and stay on them, all the things that we had to do. And the backside of the masks in the porcelain, I bit sort of the tension of showing the tension of the situation. And then I will stay is a line from one of Nancy's poems, the one that she wrote called Risk. And she was underlining those sections of words. And entangled is, you used that word earlier, it's the place that we all are at the moment. So this piece for me really relates to all of the artists, what we were going through, parts of our conversations. For me, I feel really strongly about this piece because it had all of our voices really inside of it.
I guess I can show it also in the catalog. Am I going the right direction? No.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get a nice angle on the wall piece.
Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of movement with the piece too.
Yeah, I noticed when I looked at this, I was like, are those taut or are they? And then I noticed with the larger image, you see that they're flowing.
Yeah.
It's hard to go left to right on this thing here. It wants to move the page over. I don't know where the images are in here, but see, they just are flowing here, which is nice. Well, great. That was just, you know, a sketch of what, let me see, I'm trying to get out of issue here. A sketch of what the show, you know, all of it. I mean, the exhibition is online, as I said, with the catalog. And then you can also do the 3D exhibition space. So it's very interactive. You have a lot of choices in how you can, and there actually is a print catalog, which I'm assuming here, yeah, you can purchase a catalog here. This has been a great, you know, conversation. Of course, we couldn't get into every piece that you did. There was so much work, but it's all really interesting, and people will have an opportunity to engage it online. And yeah, and thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. Yeah, I just would say that this was really a lived experience for this group. You know, we were experiencing George Floyd together, his death. I mean, we watched so many things die and change, and we were online with each other constantly throughout some of those time periods. Some of us were sick. Some of us had family members that were sick. And so all of, and, you know, with climate change and the weather, there were the hurricanes off the coast of Texas and the Panhandle. I mean, it was mind-bogglingly intense. And so we could not have known, as Gabby said, that these were the things that were going to happen when we started this. But this is where we ended up. And so I was grateful to have all of these incredible women to share these experiences with.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We have time for some questions and answers. So if people have questions, we've been sharing things with our attendees in the chat, links to the work that you were just seeing. And also, I'd like to just open it up to our panel. We don't have any questions just yet, but we haven't all been together, and it's so wonderful to have Nancy join us from across the pond. So feel free as the panelists too to unmute yourselves and speak.
Well, I know the rest of you are much more vocal than I, so I'm going to let you go ahead.
I'd love to hear from Nancy, since we didn't get to hear from her during the recording.
Hi, Patricia and everyone. It's just a real honor to be part of this presentation, and thank you for steering it. It was very interesting to hear your take on the work. And Yvonne, just great to be part of this symposium. I've been looking with interest at all the other work on show, so it'd be really intriguing to hear after the wider event how, you know, people's thoughts on this work generally and our project. It's really great. It's been a long process over time, over a couple of years now, to which I've been living in different places, and history has changed so epically. It's really, yeah, great to see how it takes shape in this present moment.
At the symposium itself, I was teaching yesterday, but trying to jump in and out of some of the lectures, has been really interesting because it's, you know, one person is interviewing inmates because this is a social action sustainability. So there's been this conversation in almost every one of our symposiums sessions about where the crossover is between social justice, social action, and sustainability. And everybody was saying it's all completely interconnected. And then we'd have people that are like heavy on the biology side, you know, the science artist people. We had future farmers in talking about the seed banks in Oslo and some really amazing projects that they're working on. So it's been really kind of incredible to hear and have the juxtapositions of each one of these conversations. So I will definitely share with you the outcomes. And there'll be video recordings on our S3A website. So you'll be able to, you know, listen to bits and pieces of things from this. We are going to be capping things off tonight with Total Science with Michael Mann, who's a world-renowned climatologist. So it'll be really interesting to hear him, you know, speak at the end of all of these artistic events.
Nancy, it's lovely hearing, I mean, thinking of visiting with the work and the collaboration with so much change in your life, or so much change in time for each of us over this span. And so that's just striking. And I'm curious, even what it's like for everyone else in the collaboration of kind of revisiting the folios at this point and revisiting the works. Has that shifted? Does it feel different to hear each other at this point, you know, or to read the things or visit, or sort of what that's been like for folks?
You know, it's funny you asked that question, Britt, because I was just sitting here thinking a similar thing, like how at this point, long after having made both the portfolios and our pieces, right, we're coming on a year since we made much of this work. you know, what still resonates, what feels really, really different, what's shifted in each of us because we've been living so long with the crisis and myriad other complicating crises on top of it. It's almost like, I mean, this is a strange metaphor, but you know, when you start to run, you run a half mile and you think, oh my gosh, I'm just going to die. And then by the end of like a couple of months, you're running 5Ks. And then if you keep at it in a year, you could probably knock out a half marathon. And so much of my nervous system is getting I mean, this is not a good thing necessarily, but it's something that I've been reflecting on. I'm so used to something kind of bad happening around every corner that I'm not quite having the cortisol reaction I was all last spring and summer. And I'm finding myself actually being able to be quite a bit more stoic about all of it, and kind of philosophical, and less agitated in an alarming kind of way, if that makes any sense. So I wonder if I was to go back in now and do this work, what I would be making. It's just something I've been thinking about.
It makes me think of the basics, think of in hearing today, you know, Yvonne talking about process the knots, or for each of us sharing sort of what was making the process and also the living with be a big part of this project. For me, it wasn't we're just like making a thing. It was also what really this prompt of what is it to live with worlds as they end, and that felt like a part of daily life and practice and thought, not just what we were making as if that was separate. But what you described makes me think of even like intro to cultural anthropology methods that we're taught, that they're sort of writing all of these robust field notes when you're new in some context and new somewhere, because there's things that are going to strike you, you're so much more attuned to or sensitive to because it's new to you at the start, that then after time you'll stop noticing. And that was some of the at least foundational methods we were taught, was kind of noticing what you notice at that beginning part. And I wonder if our acclimation over time to the things, it just strikes me when you're describing that, to the kind of feeling now more stoic, more kind of, all right, there's different norms, you know, in your life at this point. And that would raise, you know, create different kinds of works. And so what it meant, it feels powerful that we were doing this when we were, and having that thoughtfulness in the midst of both reflecting on climate change and then with the start of the pandemic hitting.
Just to trail off of that, I've been reading this article, or actually it's a book on pain and how our body adapts with pain and what pain is about, right? And there's something very similar, right, with, you know, how it was so alarming and you know, excruciating, and there is this kind of thing. I mean, I don't know if I'm still as used to it as I really would like to be, but there's this numbingness now that's happening, you know, and again, kind of similar to our response to pain, you know, and the way our bodies tend to start to adapt in some ways.
I do feel very lucky though that we were already practiced at visual and Zoom communication with each other. So we already had a sort of deep familiarity with how we see and think as a collaborative. And then for us to be in the middle of this project when an historic disruptive thing happened, really is the first time in a very long time I was able to use art in a very, very immediate way to help me truly understand and cope with the emotional duress around the disruption. And so in that way, it was an incredible gift.
I think that too, it's been such a space of very consciously, and with the way that you and Yvonne really thought about the format of our exchange from the start, and that gave us a space to be in different geographic locations at a distance, but really connected and really sharing, that this felt like it offered me, in what became a whole year of exploring, hey, what is the stuff of my social relationships? What are the different ways that those can continue? Learning that I now, like, my niece in California will show me rocks that she found on FaceTime, and I show her things here, and we're sort of reaching out on the screen, and kinds of communication and across generations that I wouldn't have thought could sometimes have the connection that they do, that this had such a being in place and with the materials of your own home and space and making something and then mailing them to someone else in the forms of connection we had there, I think are going to stay with me in a long way. And just were part of what I was exploring in the works too, is thinking of that sociality. How are we present with ourselves and in relation to others, and the form of creation, creative work that we do there. So I'm immensely grateful that you both, Yvonne, connecting us, and kind of also that genius of making some structure in these precious pages that were sent, and kind of being able to work on those together was something I haven't gotten to do that kind of collaboration before. And it did really become, wow, the substantive, it wasn't just how do we take something else and then just try to replicate it on Zoom and be frustrated it's not the same thing. It was an intentional form of collaboration across space from the start.
Yeah, and revisiting with the work today and seeing you all again, I'm feeling I miss it tremendously, especially now, because it feels like there's this feeling that the pandemic is over and things are changing really fast again, in the same way that they were changing really fast last March. And I feel almost equally adrift in kind of knowing how to handle it and knowing how to respond. And I feel the same way that like my body hasn't caught up with my brain in terms of risk calculation, and adapting to, okay, well, what's okay if I have a vaccine, and what's okay and what's not okay, because many people still aren't vaccinated, and what's happening globally, and what's happening in India, and what's going to happen in the summer and the fall. And I feel like so much space was made in this collaboration and in lots of my relationships for this thinking and contemplating and wondering and questioning a year ago. And I feel that all that space disappearing, and I'm struggling with that a lot, because it's not like the world did end in a way, and there's still lots of choices to be made about the new one. And I think it would be very unfortunate if we just kind of went back to all of the ways things were before. So yeah, I feel like I need a living with worlds as we make a new one project. And I'm so grateful for the one that we had.
Yeah, those images coming out of India, the funeral, the pyres in the city, is just, as you said, it's a strange time because it feels like things are ending. But I've been vaccinated now, and I don't know how to assess the risk either. And so I haven't really re-entered the world yet, socially at least. We are a little over time at this point, so I do want to say thank you again to all of you. It is so fabulous to see you here, and thank you for the attendees today. Least of not which is one is my husband. But it's really great to see everybody, and we will have a future conversation, as I am now the guilty holder of all of the folios. And so as I was making that little video at the beginning, was loving them and loving the backsides of each of them too. So we will have to figure out what to actually do with the physical remains. Does anybody have any last comments to make before I log us off? Thank you too.
Thank you.
All right, love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I don't want to leave.